Okay, y'all, let's get started. Amazingly enough, this class is much bigger than my 140 class, even though this is a senior level class, and the other one is a sophomore level class. Okay, so hopefully you're here for databases and scripting languages, which is probably better these days would be called databases and web programming. My name's Brad Vanderzanden. Many of you had me in 140, but if not, or 365, not, welcome. I have, as many of you know, kind of a different style sometimes in courses than other professors, in that I sometimes flip the classroom and have you do more in-class activities. So that's kind of what you're going to find in this class. This is a, what's the Charles Dickens thing? It's a tale of two, see, I'm not very good with the literature. Tale of two cities? This is a tale of two different subjects. So the first half of the course is databases. And in that part, I mostly lecture because I love to hear myself. Makes me feel great. No, because I really find it hard to flip it. I've tried and it just doesn't work very well. Second half, when we get into web programming, I'll be honest, it's not rocket science, okay? But you have to really do it in order to understand it. Second half of the class, there's going to be a lot more in-class activities. So, and there will be times, second half of the course, where I do lecture because there are certain concepts like regular expressions that actually are a little more nuanced and need some discussion. But a lot of times you're simply going to be in class working on stuff, which I haven't done it yet, but I'm pretty sure that the second half of the course I'll make attendance mandatory. The first half of the course I will not make attendance mandatory. So just be aware of that. At any rate, because the material is kind of in two sections, you are going to be a jack of all trades, master of none when you are done with this course. So we'll get back to this in a moment. Let me kind of give you the overview first, and then we'll go through all those mechanics. Because you shouldn't bury the punchline, I should tell you what to expect. And here's what to expect. So in the databases portion, we will be covering relational databases in 1 week of NoSQL. I always get bitching and moaning about how I'm not modern enough and how I don't teach NoSQL and how no one uses relational databases anymore. And then I go out and I talk to all my friends in industry and they use relational databases. So, sorry about this. Sorry you're not going to get more than a week of NoSQL, but the fact of the matter is, most of the world still uses relational databases. So yeah, NoSQL is really cool and exciting and all gimmicky, but unfortunately, most commercial stuff still uses relational databases. Actually, fortunately, in my opinion, I think NoSQL is gimmicky, having used it myself. So most of the first half of the semester will be relational databases, and there will be 4 aspects to that. The first is, how do we manipulate the data in a database? How do we do what are called the CRUD operations? Create, read, update, delete. Okay, the 4 basic things for data manipulation. Second thing is the theory. Everyone hates this part, but thankfully I've got it down to a day, I think, this semester, maybe 2. I have to go back. Originally I had it down as 1 day. Why? Because this isn't Pellissippi State. You are computer science majors. You need to know the theory that underlies relational databases. So we will have theory day or theory week. Then we have design of the database. So honestly, query language, that's end users. You don't need much training. Part of the reason relational databases became huge is because you don't need a CS degree to use them. Okay? You don't need to go to Mississippi State to be able to use them. It's pretty easy to master the query language. What's hard is the design. Okay? So we spend about 2 weeks on how you design the relations or tables in a database. And then we spend about a week on how you physically implement it so it actually runs efficiently. It doesn't run like so slowly that your business will go bankrupt. And then we'll spend about a week on NoSQL, which is a way of handling less structured data. So relational databases work really well with highly structured data. NoSQL works much better. NoSQL meaning, so relational databases, the primary system is SQL by Oracle. MySQL is public domain. It's the one we'll use. So NoSQL is a pun, meaning we're not using a relational database. And it's for less structured data like social media. I believe it was pioneered by social media types. So believe me, when you come out and you put NoSQL on your resume, you better hope the questions aren't very substantial at your interview, because we'll only cover it for a week. Okay. Second half of the course is scripting languages and web programming. I used to use Perl, but it seems like Perl is rapidly going to the dustbin of history. So I decided, since we don't actually really have a web programming course, we have a web security course. How many of you are taking the web security course? Okay, and how many have taken it? Okay. So at any rate, the web security course teaches you a little bit about web programming, but a lot of it is more on the security side, how you stop hackers from taking down your site. In this course, I will occasionally allude to some security stuff, but for the most part, I take you from how you create the web interface, which is HTML, how you format it using cascading style sheets. So these two together are how this specifies the structure of your website. This specifies how it's formatted. This is how, actually, JavaScript is the most widely used scripting language on the client side for handling, for doing event handling. Mouse clicks, typing in text, hitting links. So how the interface changes. And then PHP is the most commonly used scripting language on the server side for taking requests. Normally, it will hit a database. The request will be sent to a database. You'll get some kind of data back, and then you will send it to the client side where the JavaScript will execute some script and update the HTML. So we kind of take you from cradle to grave, not quite like that, and we do that in about 7 weeks. It goes pretty quickly, but like I said, this isn't rocket science. Okay, it's just you have to get some experience using it, and it's a lot of fun, in my opinion. I mean, it's cool to create a website and see it start to operate. So I think this is a pretty fun course, as well as being a very helpful course when you get to industry. And we don't do the more advanced things in HTML. You're not going to learn how to use the graphics capabilities. If you take one of the graphics classes, I think Dr. Wong teaches you more about HTML5 and how you do canvases and that kind of thing. When we do it, we're just talking about menus and text boxes and images, which is a big part of what most websites are. So at the end of this, I loosely call HTML a scripting language. You know, it's a markup language, really. CSS is more of a markup language. PHP and JavaScript are genuine scripting languages. And then you see down here Node.js. So more recently, people like JavaScript so much and they don't want to learn a second language. They've added JavaScript to the server side through this module called Node.js so that you can actually write server-side applications also in JavaScript. So we have about a week at the end of the semester on that. Okay, so questions about what this course is about. It's about half a semester databases, half a semester on web programming. Okay, it can be a little jarring when we change abruptly, but it is what it is. We don't have we don't have anyone in this department who's a database researcher, hence no full course on databases. My area is graphical user interfaces, so I'm more do web programming. And we don't really have anyone also who does web programming because it's not a research area. So for that reason, there's no full-length course on either web programming or databases, but we thought it was important to have in the curriculum, so I teach it, which I enjoy. And my PhD, I started out in databases and decided it wasn't for me, went into graphical user interfaces, so I enjoy databases too. Okay, so I recently retired, yay. Thank you. But I've learned that it doesn't work to say I'm retired. I have to say I'm semi-retired because obviously here I am working. I gave up my office, so I now use temporary digs. Y'all know where 217 is? So it is the student organization office. That's where I will hold my office hours. After class, directly on Thursday, I will go to lunch on Tuesdays and then come back and hold office hours from 3:30 to 4:45. So hopefully it won't be too busy in 217. But let's just say the department has a bit of an office space crunch. And my office, having it lay vacant for 9 months of the year, plus I don't really intend to come in on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for the most part, wasn't the best use of office space. So, my new office. Okay. My email, please only personal things like you need to miss an exam because you have the flu or you broke a leg, not because you're going to see the Titans lose to the Ravens or, sorry, I should be much more positive about it. That because I am a Titans fan, I just don't have a lot of hope. But you know, miracles happen. I thought they would, but I thought they'd beat the Patriots. So it's not like I'm dishing on them. It's just the Ravens are so good. Okay. At any rate, Piazza is the discussion board for the class. So in general, I prefer that you ask your questions on Piazza. If you have, homework questions, questions about the projects, I'd rather they go to Piazza. I'll tell you why in a moment. Whoops, I did not. Elvis is not. Wait, I'm so sorry. Matt, where are you? There you are. Matt Bockstein is the TA for the course. Matt, stand on up. Take a bow. Take a wave. So, Matt is our TA for the course. Matt, actually, if you want, you can take off now because I don't. So, he will be the one doing the grading. He will have a couple office hours, but we also have an undergraduate TA who is not here today, Ankush. Oh, he is. Ankush, stand up. Take a bow. All right. Ankush has had the course before, so he will be assisting that. Thank you, Ankush. I didn't realize you'd be here, too. So, Ankush, if you want, you can also take off, or you can stick around. So Ankush is going to be doing mostly office hours, but he can help. He will also be spelling Matt with grading if Matt needs help with grading. The contact info will be on the course website once I get that. Matt will be happy to know that he gets to educate whether you have whether he is going to accept your late submission or not beyond 2 days. Just so you know, he will probably say no. But if you make a persuasive enough offer, like not money exactly. I've heard that pieces of paper with Ben Franklin's likeness on it can get the necessary extension. I'm kidding. So make sure in today's world so I mean, I give you incentives to hand stuff in early. I'll get to it, okay? And you can hand it in up to 2 days late. So it's got to be pretty bad. Like, you've had the flu for a week. I get that, okay? The flu is nasty. I've had it, okay? But, you know, the thing that at the last minute your grandmother or grandfather died for the 5th time doesn't hack it, okay? You had a week to get it done. So generally the answer will be no, but Matt will be the one to send the email to, not me on that one. Okay. So, okay. Where to find stuff? 3 different places. The main website is that one right there. Even if you're in 565, it is 465. It's a split section. And it has the general course information, the assigned readings, the lecture slides, homework assignments. Piazza is for the course announcements and discussions, so I'm not going to post stuff on Canvas. The reason for having you post to Piazza is so that I don't get the same question 5 times. I answer it once. Secondly, sometimes Matt may want to make an announcement or answer a question, or I may flip it to Matt. So it's just easier to handle the discussions on Piazza. So in general, don't send me email, post it to Piazza instead. One thing, if you have a problem with programming, like especially with SQL and you're posting code, please make it private, okay? Because otherwise someone will copy your code. So you can make a private post that only instructors can see. And finally, Canvas is for your homework and project submissions, and there's quizzes there as well, which I will get to. Okay, so basically, you find the homework assignments on the course website, but you hand them in on Canvas. Also, the e-textbook is on Canvas. And there it is. So, let me show you that. So we used to have a tome. I think I have a tome with me. This beauty used to be the textbook, the database portion of the course. Table nearly buckles under its weight. So we didn't use most of that book, and actually there's a couple chapters that I am going to post online because you're going to need it. But for the most part, the Xi book covers it much more succinctly. So I love Xi books. If you took 140 from me, well, actually I asked, have any of you used the Xi books before? Some of you, okay. I like them a lot. I've gotten good feedback about them. The nice thing about Xi book is it's short and punchy. Okay, they don't. They say they understand you don't want to read a lot, so they keep it short and to the point. They also use participation activities to force you to engage with the material. So if you go to the Canvas site, you'll see ZyBook, and it's turning out that you can't just click on it and get through the ZyBook. It, for some reason, seems to want me to have to assign things. So right now, you can get access to it. I'll move these to the top by going to the pre-class activities. In the module section, these are at the top. I think I'm in the assignment section right now, which is why they're at the bottom. I'll move them to the top. If you click through, it will take you to the assigned reading for that day. And it's nice because it has animated figures, it's short and snappy, it has participation activities, so it forces you to engage with the material. If you haven't had a ZyBook before, participation activities are easy. Multiple choice, true, false, some fill in the blank. Sometimes it's just watching a simulation. If you get an answer wrong, well, I got that one correct by accident. I knew I had a 1 in 3 chance of getting it correct. If you get it wrong, it tells you why, and then it allows you to correct it. So, sorry, I'll acknowledge Camtasia here. Well, and now I will unacknowledge it so it won't bounce. So, part of your grade is, did you do the participation activities? There's no reason not to get 100% on it, because even if you miss the question, you can correct it. Okay? But by forcing you to engage with it, it's active learning. And they found that active learning is better than passive learning, where you just read without actually being periodically tested to see whether you actually took in what you just read. So the participation activities are due 10 minutes before the start of the class, so they're due at 12:30. And there's pretty much participation activities for much of the semester. There's a couple classes where there's no ZyBook for it, but for the most part, there is, and you need to do those activities before class to get credit for them. Also, please do it through Canvas, okay? So you could try to go directly to the ZyBook, although right now you can't. You actually have to go through the Canvas link, thank goodness. And then it will automatically record your score, okay? Again, you can correct your incorrect answers. There's no reason not to get full 100% for those pre-class activities. Later, so for the database portion, there are no challenge activities, but for the web programming part, there's a lot of challenge activities. Those are more programming oriented, so a little more challenging than the participation activities. And when I said that in the second half of the class, I will flip the class and have you do a lot of in-class stuff. A lot of it will just be telling you, okay, complete those challenge activities. Okay, so they're a bit like simple homework. And the reason I'll probably make attendance mandatory is so that you come here to class and do it, and I can help you if you have problems. Okay. So, like I said, the database portion does not have any challenge problems. The web programming part does. Okay. So at any rate, that is the ebook. Again, the reading assignments, sometimes it asks you to read a chapter later when you get to web programming, but it just won't take you that long. Okay, it's not a big deal. You can find the reading assignments here in the lecture notes. So The assigned readings mean that you do all the participation activities. You can also find my lecture slides here. I tried to tape the lecture and upload it. If for some reason the taping fails, which it does about twice a semester, you get a lecture from a previous semester. So if you miss class, or should you choose in the first half of the semester not to attend, you can review the lecture on video. They're all up on YouTube. You should increase the speed to 50% if you do it. So there's actual research that shows that our brain, that we don't talk fast enough, and that our brains can absorb information faster than when you can talk. And when they actually did the research, they found that speeding up your talking by about 50% was optimal. So if you do watch my videos, I would suggest YouTube has a way of speeding it up by 50%. It also raises my voice an octave, so I sound a little squeakier, but it that's just my suggestion. You speed it up. Okay, so also you can see that the homework assignments, essentially when you first see them, that's when they are assigned. So on the 16th of January or next Thursday is when your first homework assignment is made. And I have to get some handouts up on Canvas because I'm still using problems from the old textbook, so I have to scan it in. So if you look right now, you will see homework 1 says that you should use the hotel SQL file that is included at the end of chapter 4, but that's in there, so I have to get it scanned in and up. But don't worry, by next week we will have that stuff up and ready to go. Okay, so first half of the course, you will be doing homework, 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 homework. Homework pretty much every week. Second half of the course, the homework pretty much comes in the form of the in-class challenge activities. So I pretty much abolished homework and instead put in place of that a web programming project. Some of you may have heard of said web programming project and how it brutalized the class last semester. Well, fall of 2018. If not, you did hear that from me. It was too hard, so I'm actually simplifying it and giving you a lot more information this time. But there is a web programming project for the second part of the course where to make you better familiar also with it, to both have you put up a website and give you some insight into our ABET process. In addition, you create a website where you're pretending to collect information from the faculty about the performance of students in a course. So you'll be working on that project for the second half of the course, and undergraduates will get to work in pairs on that project if they so desire. Graduate students will have to work by themselves. As you can see, there's a couple assignments to force you to do intermediate milestones before the end of the project. Otherwise, there's too much of an incentive to procrastinate to the very end. And there is one homework assignment with JavaScript that I still kept in because the web project doesn't force you to do a lot with JavaScript, honestly. So there's one homework assignment in the web programming part of the course, but you can see the web programming portion starts in March. There's 2 months. There's one homework assignment. The rest of it is working on the web project. If you are in the graduate version of the course, you also will have a database project to work on. It takes usually about 1 to 2 days to finish. It's not overly difficult. And I typically assign it around probably this time, the 18th, because that's when we get to the end of the relational databases, and I forget when it's due, but you don't need to worry about that right now. It's not a big deal for the time being. I know it'll be a big deal eventually. Okay, moving back, and now I'm moving back and forth a little bit. So that was the web textbook. And again, right now, if you go through the Zybook link, you can't get to the text. You have to get to it through the pre-class activities. Okay. So grading. For both undergraduates and graduate students, this is the rough grading thing. I may give pluses. I don't give minuses. That just feels like a slap in the face to me if you get a minus. I understand you'd probably rather have a B minus than a C, but you either get a B or you get a C plus, but you do not get a B minus. So slightly different weights because the graduate students are doing a database project. So the homework's worth 20%, midterm, which covers only databases, 25%. The final covers only scripting languages, 15%. The web project, 15%. The quizzes, which I haven't talked about yet, and the challenge activities, 15%. Participation activities, 10%. That's generous. 10% of your grade, basically one letter grade, is a gift to you. As long as you do those participation activities, it should be 100%. Okay, it's slightly different if you're a graduate student because the database project is 15%, so I had to adjust some of the weights. If you wonder why there's more, the database midterm is worth more than the scripting language final, it's because I was trying to equalize the web project is 15%, plus there's one homework assignment, plus there's these challenge activities. So I wanted the database and web programming to be roughly equal. To do that, the final had to be worth a little bit less than the midterm. Questions about that? Good time to talk about the quizzes. So generally, not today, but starting next week, there is a short quiz, 20 minutes, at the end of each lecture, and it's due 48 hours later. And the reason for those short quizzes is to force you to review the material immediately. So research shows that if you review material, I forget what, generally I think it's actually within 24 hours, you have better retention than if you say, see the material and then you work on it a week later or when you do homework or several weeks later when you study for an exam. But if you are forced to review it immediately, you retain it better, hence the quizzes. They're short, generally multiple choice, true, false, and they just go over lecture, make sure that you kind of understand things, and if not, then you see what you got wrong and hopefully it corrects your understanding of it. So those quizzes are available on Canvas. They're pretty easy to know which one to do because, well, obviously modules. If you go to quizzes, it tells you the lecture and the day. So this lecture on the relational model next Tuesday, you can see it's not available even. You can't do them early. So it basically is not available until after class. And I see that I am more generous than I thought. So if it's a Tuesday quiz, it's due 2 days later. Looks like if it's a Thursday quiz, sorry, here's the Thursday quiz. I guess I make it due right before class, so that's 5. Okay. I do it differently in different classes. I will stick to 2 days, so it's 48 hours. Basically, the quiz is due right before the next class. Okay, so on Tuesdays it's due Thursday right before class. Thursdays it's due the next Tuesday. Okay, and almost always there is a quiz after class. Not today, but starting Tuesday there is. It takes 20 minutes or less, so it's not a big deal. Okay. And I know you're not going to take every quiz. I drop a number of them at the end of the semester, usually either 3 or 4. So please don't tell me if you miss a quiz, could you please make it up? Answer is no, because I'm dropping 3 or 4 of them anyhow. Okay, I know that you might be sick, you might be at a conference, something else may happen. So there you have it. Okay, so that was elements of your grade. Midterm, so key dates. The midterm will be on Thursday, February 27th. The graduate projects will be due Wednesday, March 25th at 6 a.m., which means they're really due Tuesday evening, March 24th, because 6 a.m. just is saying you can work through the evening. The final is Tuesday, April 28th. It's a midterm. That's why you only get an hour 15 minutes for it. So those are the key dates, plus I really should have added a key date for the web projects when they're due. They are due on Friday, February 24th at 6 a.m. So really Thursday evening, the 23rd. Okay. And in general, the homework assignments are due at 6 a.m. So when you see that something is, for example, the first assignment is due apparently on Friday, the 24th, but it's really due Thursday evening, the 23rd. But many of you are night owls, so you're free to work until 6 a.m. on it. Okay, I try to incentivize you on the homework assignments. So if we take a quick look at my homework policy. So for the homework assignments, you all must work independently. No pairing is permitted. I will allow, as I said, the undergraduates to pair for the web programming projects, but that's different. The SQL queries that you write in all programs will be tested by running them against test data, so please make sure they work. Basically, I will tell Matt that if an SQL query doesn't work, to give you a 0, tell you to fix it, and then give it to him when it does work. Because he's got to grade about 70 students. We have 70 students in this course. Matt's 10 hours. Matt doesn't have time to fix your SQL queries. Okay, so make sure they work. Now, I try to incentivize you to not procrastinate. If you hand in your homework assignments 24 hours or more before the deadline, 5% will be added as extra credit. So don't ask me how you can get extra credit, because this is how you get extra credit. You hand in your homework assignment 24 hours early. This also benefits me. By now, actually, the homework assignments are pretty much debugged, but nonetheless, if occasionally a student still finds something faulty, and I find out early too, something is wrong. Okay, if you submit late, you can submit up to 3 days late, and 10% is deducted each day. It really should say 10 points. So 10 points on day 1, 20 points on day 2, 30 points on day 3. So you can hand it in up to 3 days late. I really would prefer that you hand it in more than 1 day early and get the 5% bonus. Okay. And something I always get is, well, what if I hand in 3/4 of the homework early and then hand in the last part on time? The answer is you don't get extra credit. You hand in the entire thing early. Okay. Yeah, don't work with other people. Don't take stuff off of the internet. You're caught doing it. I get pissed off. At best, you will receive a 0. Here it is for that assignment. At worst, if I'm really angry, you will go to student affairs for it. So please don't do it. Okay. Graduate student project, don't worry about that now. We'll get the information for the TAs updated. I do have old exams, but I don't think they're available yet. Nope. But you don't need to see them just yet anyhow. General information. There. I'll get this fixed with Matt's information and Ankas's information. And So at any rate, if you, again, forget what the grading scheme is or need to know office hours or other stuff, it's under general information. So, questions about that? And if you haven't done it, please sign up for Piazza through the sign-up link. Okay? We good there? Okay. So, we do have an introduction to databases today, and let me just, to assuage everyone's, actually I don't think that there is any assigned reading anyhow today. Let me make sure about that. Yes, there is assigned reading for today, but the participation activities for these aren't due until the 14th. So this is the one time you'll have 2 reading assignments. Make sure that you do the participation activities for chapter 15.1 through 15.4. Just get it done by beginning of class on Tuesday. Same thing for that. So you'll have 2 sets of participation activities to do before Tuesday. Yes?
Yeah. So on the website, you said that if you miss exam without a valid excuse, you receive an average of the remaining exam and 1 letter grade reduction.
What?
Is that?
That's correct. There's 1 remaining exam, and you'll receive the grade on that exam.
If you get A in the midterm and you just willing to take a B in the final, would that be okay? Not just miss it?
Well, no. So first of all, I typically give a makeup if you. Like if you're going to a conference, you're going to get a makeup. You're not going to get, I in 29 years have not yet actually had anyone miss an exam without something that I consider acceptable. So that really is a backup clause. Okay. But that said, if you miss it and you claim, I generally do want to see like a doctor's thing, or if you tell me your grandmom died, I know it sounds hard-hearted. I'll probably want to see the funeral director's thing. I'm sorry, it's just I've learned through hard experience that there are certain excuses that tend to tug at instructors' heartstrings, but they're not always honest. So, like I said, it's never been an issue, but it's there just in case. Okay, other questions? Okay, so I'm just going to spend about 30 minutes introducing you to a few things about databases so we can have some common definitions and just know quickly what are the advantages and the disadvantages. So you would be surprised perhaps at all the uses going on. When you purchase things at a supermarket, there's probably a database that is tracking the groceries and the price of the groceries that come up when you scan the QR or the barcode. When you make purchases using your credit card, that information goes into a database. When you book a vacation online, that goes into a database. And in this course, the old textbook used a project management business, which I will post the case study for. So keeping track of rental properties and clients and the people who own the properties and the leases and the contracts, that all goes into databases. So as I said earlier, databases tend to, you are organizing a lot of information with them, often structured, sometimes semi-structured. You want to be able to do 4 fundamental operations on them. You probably have heard of the word CRUD: create, read, update, delete. So basically being able to manipulate information. So we say that a database is a structured collection of related data and its description. Description is basically, you know how when you declare all the variable declarations in your program, or you have a class and you declare the fields in the class, that's what its description is. And it's been a bit modified because now you also use databases with semi-structured collections of data. That would be NoSQL. And a database management system is all the software that manages and controls access to the database. And there's 3 primary types of software. There's the data definition language, and that is essentially where you declare your tables. So you'll see that the relational database makes use of something called tables, but just if you think of a class in a programming language, a table is like a class, and it has fields, and each field has a type like an int or a string, or in databases you add additional types like dates or timestamps. So that's what the data definition language is. It describes what the tables are, what their fields are, what the types are, the type information. Then you have the data manipulation language. That's what does the so-called CRUD operations. That's what allows you to insert data into the database, retrieve information, update information, and delete information. And then, very importantly, access control. So that's the 3rd type of software. Obviously, security is huge. You don't like unauthorized users accessing the database and stealing things like your credit card numbers or your password. Another important thing is integrity. So you don't want 2 contradictory pieces of information in the database. As an example, you don't want the salary stored in 2 different places, or your email address stored in 2 different places, because if it is, it might be that you change one and forget to change the other. Now you've ruined the integrity of the data. Okay, so integrity is big. Concurrency, you want obviously to allow multiple users to access the database simultaneously. Amazon would not be Amazon today if they only allowed 1 person at a time to access their website. So being able to allow multiple users to access it simultaneously without introducing integrity problems, right? If there's one textbook or one book left on Amazon, it might show as available to 2 different users, but only one of them can be allowed to get that book. You can't sell it to both of them. Okay, well, you can if you can back order it, but if it really is like a collector's edition and there's only one copy, you can't sell it to 2 different people. So if they both go for it simultaneously, you have to avoid a race condition. Okay, recovery control. Okay, so a hacker gets in there and munges your database, or a earthquake happens and takes down the electricity for a moment, or something happens with either the hardware or the software failing. You got to be able to restore the database to a consistent state. Okay, if it's halfway through executing a transaction like buying that rare book, you got to roll it back if it fails in the middle of it. If you got it in the shopping cart, I even got my shipping address in, but I haven't gotten my billing information in, and the database crashes, I have to roll it back. Okay, I haven't sold the book. Okay, a user accessible catalog where you can look at a description of the data in the database. So that really is just like looking at the top part of a program where you see all the declarations. So someone should be able to look up and see what all the fields are in a certain table and what their types are. And then finally, access control has to do with views. So not everyone should be able to see all the information in the database. For example, a manager should be able to see your salary, perhaps, but your coworkers shouldn't. So managers will have a view that you may not. Okay, the CEO has a view that the managers might not have. Okay, if I'm the manager of, say, a bank branch, I probably have a view of the information for everything that relates to that bank branch, but I probably don't have access to the bank branch in Cedar Bluff if I'm the one managing it on Cumberland Avenue. So views are a way to limit what people see in the database, because normally you don't want people able to see everything. Okay? So I am going to, there is an alternative paradigm. You're used to it because basically in CS102 and 140 and 160 and 302, 130, 302, and even 360, you use ASCII files, right? And they can be stored in a binary way. So before databases became popular in, well, really the 1970s, they used file-based systems, and there was a lot of limitations to them. I'm going to skip this section. You're responsible for it, but I'm going to go over what the advantages and disadvantages of database systems are, and as I do it, I will tell you why, where the database system is superior to a file-based system, and where it is inferior. And if you want my opinion about NoSQL, because I am opinionated about it, NoSQL is a step back toward file-based systems. It is good for programmers like us. It is bad for non-programmers because NoSQL is harder to use by a non-programmer than is a relational database system. So that's good for our employment because anything that's harder for an end user to use means that our services are in higher demand. Okay, so moving on. Why would we want to use a database management system as opposed to just ASCII files or ASCII files that are stored in binary format? So The first reason is that database management systems make it easy for end users to retrieve data and to specify queries. So here's a query, and it may not look so simple to you. Don't worry. We will get used to it. But also, let me just walk you through it. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find out all the names of renters that live in Joe Keogh's property. So I want to know, Joe Keogh I'm a property management firm. We rent out people's properties. Joe Keogh is one of our owners, and he owns several properties. I want to know the names of the renters that live in his property. So I want to select the client's first name and last name from 4 different tables. And I understand you haven't really seen what a table is yet, but client contains information about clients. Private owner would be a file about our owners. Property for rent would be all the properties for rent, and leases would be a list of our leases. So we are trying to look up all the information associated with Joe Keogh. So we want the file where the private owner's last name is Keogh and the private owner's first name is Joe. And actually, if this were a real query, I'd put quotes around Keogh and Joe, but not worrying about that here. Then that will allow me to find the private owner's owner number. Using the owner number, we will index into the property for rent, because in the property for rent, Joe Keogh's properties will be listed with his owner number. And once we have found all the properties that are listed with Joe Keogh, we are going to go into the property and find out, or I'm sorry, we're going to go into the lease file and find out the leases for his properties, because not all of his properties might have a lease. Some of them might not be rented out right now. And that will give us, from the lease file, all the properties that are being rented. And finally, the lease file will have what is the client number. So using the client number, we will go into the client file. And the client number will allow us to extract a row from the table that has the client's first name and last name. Like I said, that may look a little daunting right now, but that's actually a pretty complex query, and end users without CS experience, for the most part, can be fairly quickly taught how to write these queries. Doesn't require a programmer to write this query. So the database management system would translate the query into a series of operations on a back-end physical database. So on the back end, these things are stored as files. Okay? Sometimes they're stored as what are called B+ trees. Any of you heard of B+ trees from 302? Yes? Okay. Or some of them are stored using hash tables. Extendable hashing is the specific way they're organized. Some of them are so-called flat files, which are the ones you're used to, that are just a list of lines with information. At any rate, the database management software is responsible for figuring out how to access those files, retrieve the information from those files, and return the information to the user. And the user doesn't have to worry about any of that. So that's a huge advantage, because when you just use files, it used to be that you might have the sales office would have information about the clients. The leasing office would have information about the leases. There might be a third office that dealt with the owners. And you might think this funny, but it was really true. The sales office might be a COBOL shop. The lease office might use Fortran, and the private owners might use, say, Python, although this was back in the 70s before Python. But the point was, back then, you could have different departments using different computer languages. It was a mess. Different computer languages meant that the files were stored in different formats. And the only way that this query could be executed was that a programmer would write a program to pull the information from the different files with the different languages and would figure out how to write the different programs to pull it all together. And it was a mess. And you might get this report, I don't know, 4 weeks later, because you call up and you say, hey, Brad, how about I need this report with Joe Keel's properties. I need to know all the clients. I'm like, yeah, about that. We have some year-end activity to do, and yeah, we're doing a big overhaul on the client's side right now, so yeah, you're big on my list. I think I can get it to you in February. Is that good? And you're grinding your teeth, of course, like, no, that's not good. I want it immediately. So with a database, everything is in one format and one language. And there's actually a user-friendly language that they can write the query in. Okay? So that's one advantage of a database management system. Second one is that you control data redundancy. Everything, as we will see, possible is done to keep from duplicating information in a database. There are so-called keys that get duplicated. You cannot avoid duplicating keys because they are the so-called pointers we use to navigate through the files in a system. Back here, the owner number, the property number, the client number, they were keys. We could not avoid duplicating them. But we don't want to duplicate a last name or a first name. We don't want to duplicate a person's telephone number or a person's salary or a person's email address. We want it once. The reason we want it once is that anytime we have redundancy, there's the possibility that you change one of the pieces of information, but you don't change it everywhere. Okay, well, think about that scenario I gave you. We have a client office, we have a leasing department, and we have a private owner division. So the client calls up and says, yeah, calls the client division and says, yeah, I got a new phone number. And the client division is like, cool, we got it, we put it in. And they forget to tell the leasing department, which also used to be keeping the phone number in a separate file. And now, a couple weeks later, the leasing information didn't get the check from the client, and they call up the client, the renter, and they phone's out of service. They're pissed. They send the thing to collections. And the renter is like, you had my phone number. I forgot. I'm sorry. Why am I being hounded by the collection agency? Well, it turned out the client office forgot to tell the leasing office about the change in the phone number. This is what used to happen when you use file-based systems and didn't have a database management system. Under the old file-based system, you had redundant data. NoSQL, when I say that NoSQL is a slight step back, NoSQL actually uses data redundancy to try to get speed efficiency. But it runs into data integrity problems that are eliminated by database management systems, because when you eliminate redundancy, you keep your data integrity. You maintain data integrity. Okay? You always have the right email address, the right phone number, etc. So the problem with those file systems in the past is that you didn't necessarily have data integrity. Okay? Fourth advantage of databases is that they make it easier to share data because everything is kept in a centralized repository. So you don't have some of the data in the lease department and some of the data in the client department and some in the private owner's department. It's all in a centralized location, so it's easy to get to. And that means also that it's stored in one consistent format rather than the lease information being in COBOL and the clients being in Fortran. So it's all in the same place, hence easier to cross-reference. And finally, you have decreased maintenance costs. So the data is centralized, so it's easier to do backups. When files were used, you used to hard code your information into the programs. Think of classes, right? You use .h files. Why? Because you don't want, if you modify the declaration of a class, you don't want to have to change it everywhere. Well, .h files were also a recent invention, relatively speaking. It used to be every different file you had to redo the class declaration. So you change the field from an int to a float, you had to go through every file or every program and change that declaration from an int to a float. Okay? That was a pain in the neck. Once you had databases, you had that catalog, which is like a .h file. You just change it in one place. Okay, security is easier because everything goes through one central location. And concurrency is easier to control because it goes through one central location. Okay. Of course, what is an advantage is also a disadvantage. It's called the dialectic. Security might be easier to enforce because file access goes through one central location. Why might that be a disadvantage? Yes.
Because if someone breaks through that one central location,
that's right. It's like putting all your information in one place in a big fort, and yes, that fort's well fortified, but if the fort is breached, then all your data, it's possible to access it. Whereas before you had 3 different forts, they breached one fort, but the other 2 still held. So it also creates bigger honeypots for your hackers. Same thing, concurrency is, yes, easier to control because you go, well, actually, that's not really a disadvantage because concurrency is a lot harder to control when everything is distributed. But security is a both advantage and disadvantage. Okay, other disadvantages, complexity and cost. So databases are general. And when you used to use in-house programmers, you could customize the solution, so it was a lot, it was streamlined. With a database, you get all the bells and whistles regardless of whether you use it. Think of Excel or Microsoft Word. How often have any of you used all the features? Would you even know? Okay, so when you buy a general piece of software, it comes with a lot of bells and whistles you'll never use. Well, that takes up space on your hardware. It does slow down the software, and you're going to be charged for those bells and whistles even when you don't use them. So complexity and cost. Okay, size and hardware. You hear of bloatware. So Microsoft keeps increasing the size of Excel and Word and Outlook because they keep adding bells and whistles to it that you don't use, but it occupies space on your hard drive or your solid state memory that you would not waste if you had a custom file system. Performance. Generally, if you custom write something, it tends to be faster than if you use a database. So with a database, the query goes through, in effect, what is a compiler. And it goes through an optimizer. But just like you might be able to write assembly language code faster, actually you probably couldn't anymore because we don't teach you how to write assembly code. But in the old days, it was generally possible to write assembly language programs that were faster than high-level programs that were compiled. Okay, same thing with a database. The database query goes through a compiler. It's optimized, but often you could write it faster by hand. And in fact, that's the big argument for NoSQL, is that by using data redundancy, duplicating data, and simplifying some things, they're able to get better performance than you get with, and they simplify the queries. NoSQL doesn't have joins in many cases, which are the most complicated query that you can perform. Well, that simplifies things. You can write faster code. As we just talked about, greater impact of a failure. So if everything is centralized, your centralized repository goes down, you pretty much can send home everyone for the day. Okay, whereas before, something crashes in the leasing department, well, the clients and the private owner sections can carry on. Also, security, if you're breached, then they get everything. And number 5, again, why you have NoSQL is the data has to be highly structured. And as we've gotten into social media, where the data is not as highly structured, where you have highly variable sets of attributes. So each post that comes in may have a different set of attributes with it. It becomes a lot harder to structure it in a way that doesn't just let you could, but let's say that any particular record could have 20 attributes, but normally each record has only 3 or 4. You'd have a very sparse database, right, with a lot of empty fields and a lot of wasted space. So a big drawback of databases is they have to be structured. More and more, especially with social media, stuff isn't structured, at least quite as well. So they've been looking at alternatives. Okay, so at any rate, whatever is a disadvantage of a database management system, essentially is an advantage of the old file system approach. Whatever is an advantage of a database management system essentially is a disadvantage of the old file system approach. So I know I didn't go through this like one screen full stuff about limitations of the file-based approach. Please do read it on your own time, since I can't ask an exam question over it. So only thing to remember about for Tuesday is that you do need to start doing the participation, the pre-class activities, and that 2 of them have been published, one for today and one for the 14th. Make sure you get them done before class on Tuesday. Have a good weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday.